like to where we've gotten to at this point now that the show has been released and how well it's been received. But I didn't, I'd be lying if I said I knew this was coming from like the beginning, even from when I auditioned for this project. So it's been like such a long period of time. So to land where we are now, it's beyond what expectations I even could have had, but I didn't really have any. So
And
so
I
yeah,
suppose,
it feels like
yeah.
jackpot, but also like, hopefully this is just kind of, the tip of the iceberg moving forward. So
Yeah. And I suppose, Rodrigo, I spoke to one of your cast members and he told me about the audition process for him anyway. He said that basically once he got the script, it was clouded in mystery. It was under a different name and he was in self-tape, that he didn't really have an idea. He thought he was shooting for a 60s sort of Western, sort of a movie, a sort of such that it played out to him. How about you in terms of the auditioning process? Had you a bit more info? Had you a bit more background in terms of what you were auditioning for, in terms of, I presume you self-taped as well for the role, or did you have any ideas or inklings what might be? Had your talent agent manager give you a bit of a scoop or so, saying, listen, we have an inkling what this might be?
not exactly. It was, when I got the audition, I originally self-taped in like May of 2022.
Mm.
And yeah, it was just like I got a scene, it was under like, it wasn't the title of the project. It was under a working title.
Mm.
Which is actually it was called Hondo when we were working on it. That's probably why someone thought they were working on a Western, because that's like an old Western movie actually.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I didn't, when I got my audition, I wasn't quite sure of even like the tone of it, but I found it kind of darkly humorous. And so when I self-tape, I just kind of like leaned into that. And then, I sent off my self-tape, and as I usually do, like I'll do a self-tape and then I'll just like tear up my sides and throw them away because I just don't want to like be
Mm.
thinking about it. And then like about a month later, I got an email from my managers that were like, "Yeah, you're in the running for." What's funny is when they when they emailed me, they told me that I was in the running for either Woody or Reg. And I wrote
Okay.
them back and I'm like, who the hell are those guys? Because that wasn't the name of the character I auditioned for. So they kept moving, like renaming people and changing stuff. But yeah, and then I got word that I booked the part, and like I said, I didn't have any expectations because there was so much mystery surrounding the whole thing. And then when obviously before we started shooting, then they told us that it was based on, the video game franchise. And so, before filming, I just went onto like YouTube and on the internet just to research the game as much as I could because I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't a big video game player, but luckily there's no shortage of fans who like, on Reddit or YouTube that they put together these videos and just blogs about the whole franchise. So I learned a lot about it doing that. So I wanted to just be well informed when I got on set.
And tell me, Rodrigo, when you found out the cast that was attached to the project, when you arrived the first day on set, and you hear Ella Purnell, a well-renowned UK British actress, and Walton Goggins was going to be the male sort of lead, a comedy
Ah,
genius.
yeah.
In terms of that, was that a sort of breath of fresh air? Do you think to yourself, oh, with names like this attached in terms of leading roles, we're on to goods? Because everything Walton, I remember Walton in Vice Principals with Danny McBride, and he's just absolutely brilliant and sensational and that as well. But it seems like that man, if he turns his mid to a 90s, 40s Holocaust story, he could make it entertaining in terms of that. It just seems like everything he touches, his fingerprints, it's almost like he improves things, and oh, it's just breathtaking in
Yeah,
terms of.
I was blown away when I found out like, when I found out who was part of the cast. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like originally I was like, I had one of those like pinch me moments, my imposter syndrome creeped in and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, but then it became like the most amazing experience. Like everyone was unbelievably nice and welcoming. And I mean, it was just such an amazing experience just to be a part of that whole crew filming,
Hmm.
all those scenes in the vault. And like literally, I literally found myself like once a week making sure that I was that it wasn't that it was real.
Yeah. And I suppose, Rodrigo, in terms of being a vault goer, were you a bit jealous all your vault goers when you heard the outsiders were going to Namibia for a week or two in terms of sort of
Ah,
shooting?
yeah, I mean, I thought that would have been cool, but then at the same time, I also realized that, that was part of the wasteland, and I felt much more comfortable just being in the safe confines of a vault. So-
Yeah, and you mentioned about the safe confines of a vault and the character Reg. Dare I say, low self-esteem, low confidence, bit of a scaredy cat. What the he probably needs his father to pinch him by the ears and give him a big tug and a big kick up the backside and say, "Get out there, son, and get into the big bad world and stop being a pussy." And is that what we sort of see him in terms of Reg? In terms of that, he's a little boy that is now a man, but doesn't put his manhood forward. Dare I say?
Yeah, I always felt like, I always tried to find something in myself that I could relate to him, and I just always saw him as just wanting to be like just seeking approval and wanting to feel worthy. So just like wanting to be like a valuable contributor to his society, but also like trying too hard. And when you try too hard and you can't get out of your own way, and like, it's funny because I oftentimes think about Reg and like people that are so ambitious that they're just blinded by the light of their goal, that they don't enjoy the journey and they can't see what they accomplish along the way. And I feel like he wants so badly to be like worthy and accepted and be valuable, that he maybe doesn't like allow himself to enjoy some of the other things.
And one of the most iconic scenes for Reg in season one, in terms of Fallout, and no doubt there's many more seasons for the character come, is just that it's not special effects. It's not maybe mounds of dozens of action scenes or stunt scenes. It's just himself in a small booth with a pen in his hand, with a yes or no box, ticking off, and he votes against himself in terms of that. He sees
Yeah.
his name on the paper, and instead of putting a tick beside his name, he just thinks to himself, "No." That he couldn't even put a tick beside, and that sort of sequence or poignance probably stood out in terms of what Reg was about, really. That even in privacy, with no one around him or no one see him, that he couldn't back himself, really.
Yeah, he's aware of his own shortcomings, but he puts on a good like veneer of like, you know, being like confident. As that, I feel like that came out when him and Woody were addressing the assembly, where he was really trying to step up to the plate. But I think he's aware of his shortcomings, and so that was I found that moment to be really nice when I watched it. It's always different for me when I film something, because I'm so focused on that part of it, that I'm usually not comfortable actually watching myself. So because it always takes me out of it. But yeah, that was a really nice moment actually. When I watched that myself, I was like, oh, that was really nice. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose, Rodrigo, in terms of the set of Fallout and the
uh,
detail and the budget that was going in and the sheer size and sheer scales of some of those shots and locations, and what they've built up, and from the rust to the dust and mold. And speaking to one of the actors, there's no green screen involved in any of this. All the special effects are all done. Decide everyone takes every bit of detail to make everything look normal. There's no enhancements or CGI effects running through that. Were you blowing back when you saw that and said, in terms of what they had built and the infrastructure that they put together, and to put on something in terms of realism, in terms of the actors can see it for their own eyes, that they can sort of live this world, that they're not imagination and trying to see what it might appear in their own heads in terms of CGI or green screen? Were you blown back by all the
yeah.
little miniature details that you saw on set?
Yeah, the attention to detail really blew my mind, and they went for so much. They wanted to capture so much on camera, like there was like practical, real stuff, and so they did. They built those sets. There was one time when we shot most of our stuff in New York, but we had to go in Brooklyn, I should say. But then we had to travel a little further out to Long Island, where they had this like they were using this like kind of this like LCD screen technology that wraps around you,
Mm.
and so. you're like immersed in like, what it looks like. So you didn't have to like stand in front of a green screen, which made it a lot more enjoyable and a lot easier. But it was like it blew my mind when I saw how much detail they put into everything, in those sets. It
Yeah.
really made it easier, so it was really enjoyable to be, on a set where they did build all that stuff and you didn't have to stare at a green screen.
Mm.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
And I suppose, Rodrigo, in terms of the character Reg, I suppose we've seen sort of bits of his fragility of his character, but it leaves us pining and on a hook, a sort of fish hook, or sort of bait. We're sort of waiting for more in terms of maybe sort of revelations of did he have a troubled upbringing or a troubled childhood, or maybe flashes to a backstory like that to say why he's so fragile, or the fragility in terms of his character, or is it got to something to do with his parents or the original foundings of the vault or something like that. So it gives rise to so many opportunities to develop the character, and maybe touch on maybe emotional sensitivity issues in terms of childhood, or maybe problems in a backstory like that that we could see with Reg in terms of flashbacks. And that's probably intriguing aspects when some of the characters we can look towards the future and project what their future. I think there's very interesting topics or stories to be told about Reg in terms of his past, maybe going back a
Yeah.
few years as well.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. And I had created some backstory for myself, but I also know that sometimes you have to be willing to abandon like what you've created if like, if the showrunners want to like, nudge you in a different direction. But I did come up with something about Reg that with his father, that his father was very demanding of him and wanted him to succeed. And that was like a measure of your worth, was how high you could climb in this meritocracy basically. But so he I think he felt that pressure from a young age to that's why he strives to be like, validated and strives for acceptance, because I think his father put a lot of pressure on him to do that. So I
And
mean,
I
there's a
suppose,
lot of things that like
yeah,
as actors we're allowed to create for our
yeah,
backstory. And there's some things that like, some things I always just keep to myself. And then there's some things that I'm willing to talk about. But like I said, sometimes you have to just be able to abandon your plan if the story requires you to, move in a direction that's maybe goes against everything that you created.
yeah. And I suppose, Rodrigo, I suppose all up until dare I say in April, the release on April the 11th, it was sort of everything was sort of rosy in the world of Rodrigo Luzzi in terms of nice sort of quiet life. I suppose a bit in terms of popularity note, where you could probably do sort of live a sort of normal life. Tell me, what has the past months been like? Has it been an absolute carnage in a good way? Have you sort of noticed things maybe change or alter in terms of walking the streets of New York or stuff like these days? Are you getting more looks now these days that you would have got maybe a month ago?
You know what? I've gotten more like, people just hitting me up on Instagram, or people following me on my Instagram, but like my day-to-day life doesn't feel any different. I live in New York City, which is really easy to just kind of like be anonymous. Like people just go about their business, which I love. I mean, I was born and raised here, but also thankfully, like, when I walk around day to day, I don't actually look like Reg, like I
Yeah,
have a whole different style, whatever. So I don't really get recognized on the street. I also a little more backstory about me. I've been doing this for a long time, but I've done like I used to do a lot of television commercials, and
yeah,
luckily nobody ever noticed me on the street from those either, because I always just look different in the project than if you see me just walking down the street. So yeah, so luckily, like, nothing like that has changed. Like I said, my day-to-day life just feels the same. It's more that, people have been reaching out to me, just randomly messaging me on social media saying, "Oh my God, Fallout's amazing. You were so great, blah, blah, blah." So that's really nice. Although, like it doesn't change like the way I approach, any other audition I have coming up, or You know, it keeps, I like humble pie, you know.
Yeah. And when you got to sit back and watch the series for yourself for the
Ah,
first time and watch it through, do you almost become a fan
oh
yourself
my,
in
oh,
terms of what they were doing?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because you know what? What's wild is like there was so much stuff that I wasn't like privy to, you know?
Yeah.
Like we would get our scripts and most of the time it just was the stuff that we had to film. And there might have been some other stuff included that was going on in the wasteland, but to be quite honest, sometimes I would just kind of gloss over that because I was like, I'm in the vault. I don't really know what's going on up there, and maybe I prefer to like not know because
Yeah.
uh it allowed me the opportunity to watch the show and like as a fan, because I didn't know everything that was going to happen. So I was caught by surprise a lot.
Okay. And I suppose penultimate question: has your paths crossed with Walton Goggins on set, or are you vault goers and wasteland goers? Are you kept apart?
So I saw him only one time when I was filming, and it was like, we were in the Navy Yards, but he must have been filming something in a different part of the studio over there. But I saw him in like that ghoul outfit, and it really freaked me out because I didn't know who it was, and I thought it was like I was like, oh my God, is that like a burn victim? Like I didn't know who it was. And then somebody told me, "Oh no, that's Walton Goggins. That's his like ghoul outfit." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me." I was
Okay.
like, that is the most amazing look I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So it was very startling when I the first time I saw him, like I said, it was just in a hallway, and I was like, oh,
Yeah. No doubt, Rough Hob, hopefully with season two or season three, he can make a pop down to the vaults in terms of the thing and sort of thing like that. And we might see him crash the vaults or maybe put his feet up there for an episode or two so you can
that
all
would be
sort of,
amazing. That would be
uh,
absolutely amazing. Yeah. I
you
was
see.
actually thinking about that, like as I was finishing off the series, I was like, wow, he could actually wind up in our vault, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, in terms of Ella going back maybe to find her brother or something like that, or something in that, in
exactly.
terms of going forward. And I suppose, Rodrigo Luzzi, I'm going to turn it over to you now for the final 30 seconds. You might enlighten all our audience listeners if they haven't caught, if they have been, let's say, on Mars for the last month or so, or caught in a desert island or shipwrecked at sea, and they haven't heard about Fallout, and they're just getting back to normality and they want to watch something to watch. Why should they watch Fallout, and what's in store for them?
Oh, it's such an immersive experience to watch that show and just the world building and the imagination and how they, especially not just for fans of the game. This came up a lot when we went to the premiere. Everyone was asking about how are the fans of the game as opposed to people who don't play the games gonna, you know, take this whole series in. And I said, I think you didn't have to play the game to enjoy this show. Like I said, the massive world building they did in the show, it's phenomenal. It's so entertaining. It's I highly recommend it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in it, like I have so many friends that like, weren't video game players and they all started watching it because they knew that I was in it, but they immediately fell in love with it. Like I literally haven't talked to a soul that I know that hasn't enjoyed watching the show. And that's amazing just to be a part of something like that. So yeah, I mean, I'd say just binge it, It's easy to binge.